Ready? We're live? Oh, we are live. Cool. Hassan, we're good? Yeah. Awesome. All right. Hey, everyone, Fuseman. And Vasanth's my real name. And I'm happy to give this talk, AR/VR 101, all your questions answered. And Hassan was going to be presenting a little later in part of this talk. So real quick before we get started, I wanted to ask a few questions. So one, who here has heard of us from YouTube or our channel? All right, we got a few. I like it. All right. By the end of this, hopefully you'll all know us. And second, I want to see who here has developed a VR project or prototyped anything before. A lot more hands. I like that. And third, I want to know who here has questions already and just kind of gauge the audience on that. No one. All right. All right, one counts. So that just kind of gives us a sense of this presentation, and we'll try to tailor it based on that. And we kind of wanted to make this more of a Q&A, but and the main reason for that is I think a lot of the stuff we're going to cover has been documented on our YouTube channel and social media. So if you don't know us or haven't followed us there, you can, and that you can get all of that information there. So to kind of give context for this talk, this is who we are. We're the FusedVR team. We run a YouTube channel to teach VR development. We put a video out once every week. And we do live streams, so you can interact with us there, get any questions you have answered. We have a pretty big community, and it's really fun to actually just build prototypes every week and see what works and what doesn't work. So I'm Vasanth, Fuseman, and we have Abdo, who is, so this talk is actually getting live streamed, and he's actually in the chat there, and Hassan, who's right over here. So that makes up the team. Hassan is currently contracting at Facebook for a group called the Tech Start, which is putting they're giving VR headsets to people in Arkansas and hopefully across the US to kind of spread VR to the masses. And I'm currently working with Abdo at Udacity to develop their VR Nano degree, which is another program that you can use to kind of kickstart your VR development. So quick roadmap for this talk. We have one is just kind of how do you get started with VR development, because that is already a hurdle in and of itself. Two, how do you get serious with VR development once you've kind of gotten the basics down and want to kind of put something on these stores? And three, why is now really a good time to develop for VR? There's a lot of pros and cons to it, and we're going to talk through that. So getting started. So the main thing here you want to keep in mind is you really have two options. There are other things that you can explore, but really for getting started, one of the best ways we feel is using either Unreal or Unity. They both have their pros and cons. With Unity, we think the biggest thing is that you are able to have this huge community with Stack Overflow, Google as your resource. And if there's a challenge that you've are trying to tackle, you have those resources as an option to kind of solve it. Because if you're trying to solve it, likelihood someone also was trying to solve it as well. And for Unreal, we think, while it doesn't have as big of a community, one of the nice things about it is it has a high graphical fidelity. And also, if you're not into scripting, it has a nice visual editor that you can use to develop your own software and makes things interactive. So once you've picked your engine, you then have to pick some tutorials and start learning how to navigate around. For Unity, we really recommend going to their website and taking a look at their Rollerball tutorial. It's not VR, but it'll get you a sense of what this engine is like and why, or how you would actually go about navigating. Same with Unreal. We recommend going to their forums. It's a really great place for getting started and just learning the basics. Another thing I'll point out is the Udacity VR Developer Nano degree. It's a pretty new resource that's available now, and it starts you from the basics of developing with Unity and going all the way through to actually putting your first VR experiences, either for mobile VR or the Vive. And so once you've picked your platform, whether that's Unity or Unreal, then how do you actually go about moving into the VR side of things? And for this, I mean, you have so many headsets out there. On the top here, we have a bunch of mobile VR applications that you can use. On the bottom, we have PC VR. And if you're trying to get a little bit more experimental, you can even try the HoloLens and some AR headsets that are out there. And for us on our YouTube channel, what we really like to play with is the Vive, or more generally, PC VR. And we think the reason for that is there are two main reasons. One, there's just this nice part about being able to rapid prototype with these PC VR systems when you're just immediately plugged into your PC environment. And two, hand controllers are really a big win. And this image here kind of demonstrates this. This is from a live stream we did a couple weeks ago on boxing. And you can see here is just simply we're inside the Unity editor. we're able to just punch this robot around, just play around with it. We have physics fully simulated, and it just works within Unity. And it's just because the Vive supports that, the hand controllers are just really fun to play around with. And so that's something we really like to play with. It feels good. And so the last thing is, once you've picked your editor and once you've picked your headset, you then need to figure out what you want to build. And that ultimately comes down to passion. If you're passionate about the project you want to build, you'll overcome any of the challenges that you really face. And it's going to drive you to ultimately overcome those challenges, because I guarantee you will face them, and then Google or Stack Overflow them, come across another challenge, and overcome it. And just because you're passionate, you'll keep going until you finally put something out. So that's a huge, huge part of that. And so we've talked a little bit about those 3 steps there. So getting an engine, getting a headset, and then finding a passion. And for me and Hassan here, it took us a few months to actually get through that process. And so I'm excited to say that we're working with SVVR and their team to put on some development workshops where in one day we can get you through that getting started process. And I think I'm excited to introduce so many VR developers into this ecosystem, because VR as a whole right now really needs content and more developers. So this is just another option that we're excited to be putting out there. All right, so you've gotten started. Now how do you get serious? And I think it really comes down to having an open mind as that first starting point, which kind of sounds a bit strange. And the reason for that is, so you have this idea that you're super passionate about, but in reality, it's probably not the actual experience that you want to end up finally developing. You're going to have to go through a lot of iterations, find out what works, what doesn't work, and explore, because really VR is this unknown space, which kind of leads to the second point, which is rapid prototyping. You need to be able to experiment super fast, and this is one of the reasons we like PC VR, because it allows you to go in and tinker and try something in a matter of seconds, figure out if it doesn't work, which is just a huge game changer. And ultimately, with an open mind and rapid prototyping, you're going to get to an experience that you really think is shareable to a lot of people. And that's really, through this experimentation, and like I said, VR is an unknown space, you will come across something that's gold and worth sharing. So that's kind of our process and thought behind how we kind of go about creating stuff for YouTube. And some other resources that we want you guys to check out is TiltBrush is a really amazing tool. We actually, just last weekend, put out a video on how to use the TiltBrush SDK. You can create stuff with PC VR, draw things, create an environment, and once you do that, bring that into Unity, add some interactivity, which is the fact that you don't have to be an artist anymore to make cool things for VR is amazing. And Medium is also another great alternative, and there's more stuff. If you check out the expo floor, you'll find a lot of cool things that you can actually use and start developing with. And the other thing I'd like to make a huge shout out to is VRTK and the StoneFox. So StoneFox created this open source repository of a bunch of different toolkits that are so amazing to get you to build anything you want with practically no coding. And more than just the toolkit, I think their community is one of the best resources online. It's about 1,000 people right now, and each and every one of them is willing to help you figure out how to test and properly make your VR experience amazing. So if there's one thing you take away from this, highly recommend you check out their Slack channel, his YouTube channel, all of that stuff. It's really amazing work, and we're lucky to have him in this community. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Hassan, who is going to talk to you a bit more about getting serious, and then finish off with why now is a great time to develop for VR.
All right. Thanks, Vasanth. So as he just mentioned, to close out the getting serious section, I just want to share some really important high-level advice that we have, and then also talk about how you can go about building a team. So our high-level advice is pretty straightforward. You need to start training yourself to see the mechanics behind the magic of AR and VR experiences that you try out. This is as simple as just trying tons of experiences and always asking yourself, why are they working and how could they be better? If you do that, eventually you'll start to develop your own intuition for mechanics that work and also some design patterns that are really awesome. This is something that our team does all the time, so I want to share an example of a lesson that we learned with all of you. Two of our favorite experiences are Robo Recall and Job Simulator. Now, on the surface, they're very different. In one of them, you're shooting robots all the time. The other one is a comic take on a 9-to-5 day job. Hopefully for you guys, shooting robots in your day job are not the same thing, or maybe they are. But again, on the surface, these are two completely different experiences. But if you look deeper, they both excel at one common thing, which is that they invite users to experiment in the virtual world. And when those experiments work, it feels great. In Robo Recall, there are tons of ways that you can destroy robots. And in Job Simulator, it's fun to just piece together the objects in lots of different and exciting ways. So two different experiences, one common mechanic behind the magic that they're using. And some other ones too, but this is at least one shared thread that they have. And if you're excited about developing your own ability to see some intuition and figure out what different mechanics are, you should follow along with our YouTube channels. For over a year now, we've been showing every week how to create a new concept in AR and VR, or how to prototype mechanics from scratch. So it's a great community to join if you just want to dive deeper and start developing your own sense for this stuff. Now let's talk about building a team, the epitome of getting serious and actually moving to the part of trying to build a complete product and experience. We'll think about this in terms of what skills you might need to develop if you were to join a team, and also what you should look for from your teammates. And we think about it in terms of 4 broad role areas. Some of these might overlap a bit. So for software developers, you're definitely going to need to become comfortable with Unity and Unreal. It's easier than you'd imagine if you have past software experience. You'll also want to get comfortable, at least at a surface level, with graphics and 3D math. One resource that we really like, especially for graphics, is RenderHell, which is an online tutorial series. Now let's talk about artists. You're going to need to do some engine work too. You'll need to look into Blender, Maya, or other types of engines so that you can get away from just designing for 2D and start thinking about 3D space. And you'll also need to do work in terms of how to optimize your 3D models so that they're performant for VR and AR. Business developers. There's not much of a defined map for success in VR and AR right now, so you're going to need to think a lot about different options that you can use for your team. Right now, it's particularly useful to work with other people for partnerships and to drive your brand using online channels. Last and not least, we have designers. If there are designers out there, please do not design from scratch. There is tons of resources on AR and VR design on the internet. One that we recommend starting out with is Voices of VR. You'll also need to be really scrappy about testing because there aren't that many users out there, and it helps to know enough Unity and Unreal so that you can come up with quick prototypes and test with your team. Let's go the next step. Where do you actually find these people? Well, for us, we think that software developers, artists, and designers, you can use some common strategies. Check out meetups in your area. SVVR is an awesome one. If there aren't meetups in your area, start one, and people will come. Check out universities, because lots of them are starting to develop VR and AR classes, and you can pluck from that talent. Online communities such as DeviantArt, Sketchfab, and Reddit are great too, and most industry conferences, events, and hackathons are starting to build out VR and AR verticals, so you can find all of these roles there. You'll notice that we left out business developers. From our experience, they're the easiest to find. They actually find you, and very often they come with business cards too. So we've gone over at least surface level. How do you get started? How do you get serious? And we're excited for the questions that you have for us. But one final question is, why now? So you'll hear at least 3 types of reasons throughout this expo. People are going to tell you that the tools are great, the community's awesome, and some funding options are popping up. We think that those are all true, but our call to action is much more personal than that. At least for a little while longer, the AR and VR spaces will reward each of your unique contributions and what you're excited about more than most other spaces can. If you're a developer, just build something. It could be crazy. Post it online, and people will check it out because people are hungry for content. Maybe you're on the business side. Jump in, try to figure out where the opportunities are, and share that too. People will get excited about it, and people are forming communities for that purpose as well. I bet there's at least some of you who think, oh, maybe the tech's not for me. I'm too late. I missed the boat. For all of those of you out there, you're wrong. There's lots of people like you and people like us who are excited to get you started and get you building. There's really space for everybody, and at least right now you can make something that you're really stoked about and something that also pushes the AR and VR spaces forward. All you need to do is start building, and for our team, that's why now. Thank you. All right, questions. That's what we promised.
All right, we got one here.
So when you're building your first project, it seems like there's at least two paths you can go. One is as a destination to try and get something up in the App Store maybe for free, maybe on Google Play. And then the other is to make something a little more fully fledged, test it with local users that you meet personally, and then try and build a company out of that before you have something online. What are the pros and cons of going that way or just kind of project?
So
Take it?
I'll take it. I think it's a cop-out answer, but like it really does depend on what you're trying to build. I think there's really no wrong answer to that. It's kind of what you feel. There's huge value to user testing, and I think you'll see with a lot of the apps that are on Steam that don't get user tested, they end up getting poor reviews and they end up getting buried, and it's kind of sad to see, but that's just the reality of it. So if you give yourself more time and you can afford yourself more time, I definitely recommend spending that with users and being able to make it something that you really think is something with, say, a Robo Recall level or Job Simulator level, and it'll make everyone happy. There are of course like budgets, finance. Those are all things that might need you to shorten that timeline and cut out some of those things. And that's realistic, and having that shorter experience and setting expectations is fine too, but ultimately it kind of comes down to polish, I think.
Yeah, and just one quick point to add in there. I'd be wary of testing with the same user group over and over again. It's speculated that people get more used to VR, the motion sickness, and all of those things over time. So it's possible that early on they're giving you really solid, great feedback, and then later they've kind of trained to your experience. So definitely useful to test with a lot of people.
Yeah. There are a few. You can, if you find them on, oh, sure, yeah. So that the question was, if you don't have bandwidth to, say, build your own experience, are there other places online that you can search for to actually build your own VR experiences? And there are a few. If you look, there are a few Facebook groups out there that cover virtual reality. I've seen posts on there asking for contract jobs to do that. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but that would be one resource I would say to go look for.
I believe FusedVR also has some of their own contracting and just independent, like freelance individuals. You could reach out about that. I also really want to press on the point about no bandwidth to build your own. Like maybe you don't want to jump into Unity and Unreal. That makes sense, but some platforms that we didn't talk about in the web VR space make it really easy to just drag and drop stuff if you at least want to show prototypes. So we really like Visor. A-Frame is great if you have some prior web development experience. I've also heard of InstaVR is another one. And these are just drag and drop, mostly no coding required, but they have the options. Well, A-Frame has some coding, but the other ones have the options to really dive deep if you want to make it a full experience.
So you guys mentioned basically build it, right?
Yeah.
If you have an idea, build it. And you guys spend a lot of time essentially teaching, right? Talk about your decision, right? Instead of spending your time building and becoming millionaires with the apps and VR that you build, right? You spend your time teaching the rest of the community, right? For not as much as what a developer would.
Yeah. That's not to say that we're not building our own things. We are.
Yeah.
We're going through that experimentation process ourselves. I mean, I mentioned in the talk, no one here is an expert, and we're still learning a bunch and seeing what works in a full-fledged experience. We have some prototypes, but nothing like fully complete. And we're kind of in this situation where we want to build something really good for the community, and that's just going to take time. But in the meantime, we have we can share anything we're experimenting with the community. And I think that's the unique position we get to be in, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and we're definitely both working on together and even independently, just some fun side projects. But it's just that after starting the channel and going with that, so many requests come in for new things that it's hard to balance everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like, especially in the last year, year and a half, the democratization of technologies, things like Unity and whatnot,
Yep.
really empowered the community to make a lot of stuff. What do you think is going to be the next big democratization that's going to assist the developer community in uptake as well as public adoption?
I'm pretty sure we'll have different answers on this.
You want to go first?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's already democratized, but I'm pretty excited to see how WebVR pans out. I mean, it's been there for a while, but it's starting to get much more formalized now, and there's a lot more people getting interested. It's also just a promising proposition to web devs. Like, it's an easy way to jump in. A lot of people will look at Unity and Unreal and get a little scared, think that they have to learn something completely new. Web dev's kind of just a nice first taste, a gateway into it. And so I'm excited to see how that works out.
Yeah, I think that's a great option. And then I'll just add on, one tool I'm really excited about is Unity and Unreal's Editor VR, where you're actually building things in VR. I think it's not perfect by any means just yet, but I think in a few more iterations, we'll see something that might be a bit more approachable to other people. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, there's a question
Yeah,
over there.
it's not bad.
Quick question. Thanks for sharing your best practices.
Mhm.
We need more of that. As most industries in the technology space have matured over the years, right? There's a standardization or there's a consortium that comes together to put standards from development, coding, whatnot, right? Are you guys seeing some of that happen? Are you guys influencing some of that? How is that evolving as we speak?
So,
Standardization, the IEEE.
so my take is our goal with the YouTube channel is more to get people started. We're still very in this wild, wild west. Sure, there are some people that say, for example, VR locomotion. Some people say you want no locomotion. Some people say you want teleportation, and they might call that best practice, whatnot. My take on that is you can maybe call it best practice, but I think we're still figuring out what is best practice for the best individual. So there are people out there who want you to make it so crazy that you get simulator sickness, but they can handle it. And that's fine, and you should build those experiences as much as a lot of people might say, don't even touch that. But I don't want to say that there's any quote unquote best practice just yet.
Yeah, I think it'll take time. I agree.
Are you seeing any industry formation or people coming together to drive that?
So, I mean, hardware side, there are lots of collaborations going on to make sure that all the hardware is compatible. When it comes to best practices from design, I mean, none in particular come to mind. I just know of a lot of different repositories and places where people are talking about different practices. So I think the Voices of VR is awesome. Research VR is another podcast that's pretty cool. And then really just a lot of universities too. They've been doing research before these headsets cost like $500 and they're more like add a few zeros. They've been researching them and they have cool studies and results from those, but I haven't seen them all compiled in one place. That would be exciting to start working on, as long as it comes with the notion that it's tentative and that a lot is still being discovered.
Yeah, and I'll just add on real quick that I think it's because the hardware is also evolving, and as the hardware evolves, like, for example, if we had an EEG simulator that you put on the temples of your head and stimulated your vestibular system, I think simulator sickness would be out the window. You wouldn't design against that. And as that hardware evolves, we'll start to see different design patterns evolve, and that's a good thing.
More questions?
For starters, Unreal has a visual editor, which is fantastic for the non-program languages. Now, Unity, on the other hand, doesn't have that visual scripting available. So if I want to jump into Unity, what do you recommend as a non-language programmer?
So
I have to go and jump in and start learning C++ or C#?
For, well, one, yeah, I agree with him. It's not that bad to pick up if you're feeling, I mean, we also want to make sure that you feel comfortable with it. The Unity, and I'm totally blanking out on the name of this,
Yeah,
they do have, on the asset store, they have a visual editor. I think a Playmaker? Yeah, Playmaker. You can buy that. I don't think it's cheap, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it is an impressive engine that you can use, and that's visual scripting.
Yeah, and the code side, at least, well, on the prototype level, the code is relatively straightforward. I mean, if you're not coming from a programming background, it could be tough just to get the first steps. But it starts to get a lot more gnarly and complex when you're building out a full experience. The prototypes you can do with mostly just some like boilerplate and having some basic intuition or finding stuff online. Also check out Visor. They have a visual editor too.
Saw one in the back. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I mean, so it kind of depends on the platform, and I guess I should reiterate the question. The question was, what are distribution channels that you can put your apps on? There are a few other than Steam. Itch.io is a great website for just putting up prototypes that you make. Obviously, the App Store for mobile VR, and the web for web VR.
Yeah. I think those are all solid, and then meetups, great way to just test something out in a group. Like SVVR, for example, lets people come and just show whatever they're building.
Yeah. All right, yep.
You guys mentioned like the universities that had VR for the longest time. Can you talk briefly about your first experience in VR, how you felt about it? Like, what was your first,
Yeah.
and then, did it go right to the Vive? Just started with cardboard? Tell us about that.
Yeah. Actually, I think my story is more documented on YouTube. I worked at Stanford's VR lab there, but I think my first experience was with cardboard. And I stuck with that for probably a year or two, got the gear, a few more months, got the Vive at Vision Summit, and was hooked from there. And it's just so much fun to actually develop with.
Yeah. I'll start by saying that cardboard is actually one of my favorite products of all time, and had a big play in the shift. So we both did our undergrad at Stanford, and that's where I first had my experience trying just a research study that somebody had created. But at that time, the headset was too expensive. I thought that it was just going to be something that's locked into laboratories and things like that. Later on, when I was interning at Google, somebody encouraged me to try a cardboard, and that's when I realized, like, wow, this stuff is going to be available to a lot of people. This is really cool, and the rest was just after that, really.
Yeah, it's crazy how cardboard democratizes a lot of things.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. I think we're at time. If you guys have more questions, we'll stick around here and happy to answer them, but I do want to be respectful of time for a little bit.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Yeah.